Welcome to the Diversity Roundtable of Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. My name is Adrian Palau Tejeda, and I am the Diversity and Inclusion Advocacy Fellow at the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. We're pleased to convene patients, community organizations, policymakers, stakeholders in the rare disease community today to discuss the experiences of diverse and underserved rare disease patients and harness the power of data, stories, and the expertise around this virtual table to catalyze action. Thank you to our Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill Diversity Roundtable supporters, panelists, and sponsors. And a special thank you, please, to our presenting sponsor, Travere Therapeutics. Thank you to our Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill 2021 sponsors overall. In years prior to the Year in Diversity at the FDA and the 2 years following, clinical trials are still not including diverse groups of individuals in underserved communities. For instance, almost 2/3 of drug trials prior to 2018 did not include any American Indian or Alaska Native participants. As of 2017, almost 14% of African Americans reported having fair or poor health, compared to 8% of non-Hispanic whites. And as of recently as 2019, non-elderly American Indian, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, and Black individuals reported having poor health or remain more likely to lack health insurance than their white counterparts. Following the movements for equity in 2020, the call for immediate and actionable societal change for marginalized and discriminated communities is being heard by decision makers, and diversity is at the forefront of the conversations and policy change. Now it's our time to make sure that these calls are heard and that actionable change is followed through. Today we will have 4 breakout sessions during the roundtable to highlight the urgent issues facing the rare disease community and diverse patients in them: access, clinical trial participation, and therapy development, and newborn screening and diagnostics. Each of these breakout rooms will feature a panel leader from our community who are actively working in these areas in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our staff moderators will help foster a conversation with questions so that panelists can share their perspectives and experiences in these areas. Before we begin our breakout sessions, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Congressman GK Butterfield. Congressman Butterfield was first elected to represent the 1st District of North Carolina in 2004, and as co-chair of the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus, he has been a champion for the rare disease community in Congress, including co-leading the Speeding Therapy Access Today Act. Congressman Butterfield also served as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus in the 114th Congress, and he sits on the influential Committee on Energy and Commerce, where he serves as the vice chair of the Subcommittee on Health. Thank you, Mr. Butterfield, for your continued leadership and support of the rare disease community.
Good afternoon. I'm U.S. Congressman GK Butterfield, representing North Carolina's 1st Congressional District. I want to welcome each of you this afternoon to the Diversity Roundtable, hosted by Rare Disease Legislative Advocates. Each of you is so important to the families and individuals across the country living with a rare disease diagnosis and all those still seeking answers. The work you do is incredibly important. I am thrilled to participate in this event. I serve as the co-chair of the Congressional Rare Disease Caucus. This bipartisan and bicameral caucus serves as an informational hub for members of Congress and our staffs. We work to educate members on issues facing the rare disease community, like the investments needed to develop treatments and cures, the economic impact of rare diseases on patients and their families, and the challenges in getting a diagnosis and accessing specialists. In addition to this caucus, I am the co-chair of the Childhood Cancer Caucus and the Sickle Cell Disease Caucus. Both of these are rare diseases. If we want to combat rare diseases, we must increase our investments in research, expand and encourage participation in clinical trials, and create incentives for companies to develop the next generation of treatments and cures. As you well know, research and investment in rare disease is severely lacking. More than 30 million Americans live with a rare disease, half of whom are children. However, there are over 7,000 different rare diseases, and the patient population for each one is very small. This makes it difficult to find researchers and companies willing to take on the risk that comes with developing a treatment for a small population. Further, some rare diseases disproportionately impact minorities and other underserved populations who have historically been underrepresented in clinical trials and ignored in medical research. This issue, my friends, is long overdue for attention. In my view, the problem has at least three components. First, drug companies. Drug companies and academic researchers have a poor track record when it comes to involving these communities in biomedical research. Our nation's history of unethical experiments on African Americans and the persistent racial bias in the medical field have created an environment where these communities are mistrustful of medical research and are reluctant to participate in clinical trials and research studies. However, without participation by racial minorities and other underserved populations, it is not only impossible to get an accurate and complete picture of a disease and its potential treatment, but racial inequities are made worse. A second problem is the lack of access to clinical trials for those in underserved areas who may want to participate. Oftentimes, clinical trials are run out of large academic medical centers. Getting to those locations can be difficult for patients who live in rural communities or who lack proper transportation. In addition, lack of access to paid sick leave and time off often makes it unfeasible for patients to take time out of the day to go to required appointments. Innovative trial designs that incorporate partnerships with community organizations like community health centers can help to increase participation by bringing the trial to the patient, so to speak, rather than burdening the patient with getting to the trial. Now, the final issue is a huge disparity in funding for diseases that primarily affect racial minorities. Sickle cell disease, that's a prime example. Sickle cell disease primarily affects African Americans and can cause lifelong complications and death. A recent study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association compared funding for cystic fibrosis and sickle cell disease. Both diseases are inherited disorders, and both can require frequent hospitalizations. Despite these similarities, research funding and industry support for cystic fibrosis outpaces that of sickle cell disease, despite a greater prevalence of sickle cell disease. Isn't that unfortunate? This is not to say that we shouldn't direct resources to cystic fibrosis. We should, but we know there are gaps, huge gaps, in research, and those gaps are likely caused by a combination of the biomedical establishment historically overlooking and unethically treating minority populations, and the distrust in those communities that have resulted from this mistreatment. Despite the dire situation, I believe we have reason to be optimistic. The past 18 months have served as a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call of sorts to the drug industry and to the biomedical researchers. The COVID-19 pandemic showed the entire world in real time how health disparities and inequities play out in our communities. As a result, we have made a little bit of progress and have seen COVID-related trials conducted to deliberately include underserved and underrepresented communities. In addition, the government, researchers, and industry have made a concerted effort to do outreach, significant outreach, to these communities by working with community organizations and faith leaders, they have been able to listen to concerns about COVID treatment and vaccines and address them in a culturally sensitive manner. This trend of deliberate inclusion and outreach must continue. And so I am working with my Energy and Commerce Committee colleagues. I'm working with Congresswoman Robin Kelly and Congressman Tony Cardenas to develop legislation to increase diversity in NIH-funded research and clinical trials. I can't release too many details quite yet, but the NIH would work with sponsors to develop diversity standards for clinical trials. This is an important step to ensure that any trial conducted with NIH funds would intentionally be diverse and be representative of the populations they are intending to serve. We've gotten feedback from academic researchers and industry and hope to put forth a product that will drive meaningful change in the way NIH-funded clinical trials are conducted. We are in the final stages, and I hope to be able to share this bill with you very, very soon and get your support. And so thank you. Thank you for having me to speak with you today on this very important topic. I'm grateful for the work that all of you do. I am proud to stand with each of you and the rare disease community. Please know that you have an advocate in Congress, and I will continue to be your friend and champion in this fight. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Butterfield. I think the key points that Mr. Butterfield, the Representative Butterfield touched on today are really insightful to what we're going to be discussing today. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking part in this amazing event. Based off what I've heard from the rooms, it sounds like it went just as amazing in other different breakout sessions it did ours. And echoing the sentiment that I wish this could have gone on longer, and that I wish this could have gone on longer and gotten through more questions. I can say this is not the end of diversity and rare disease. This is not the end of our efforts in it. And that conversations like this are incredibly important. Thank you to all our trusted community partners, our panelists, and most importantly to you for attending this event. Now I'd like to invite Tammy Boyd to help provide closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. And I will be brief as I'm standing in between everyone and the end of this session. So I'm Tammy Boyd. I'm Chief Policy Officer and Counsel for Black Women's Health Imperative. BWHI is the founding member of the Rare Disease Coalition, which I'm a steering committee member. Every Life Foundation is a critical member and a voice of RDDC, and RDDC is happy to partner in today's event, especially as we discuss diversity. I'm happy to be here this afternoon to give the closing remarks, which has truly been a wonderful week of advocacy. First, I want to say to Every Life Foundation, I want to thank Every Life Foundation for inviting me to speak and for holding Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill and for hosting the Rare Disease Diversity Day. And congratulations again on a successful day. And just want to tell you a little bit about RDDC. RDDC, it was formed under the leadership of Black Women's Health Imperative to help address really the extraordinary challenges faced by rare disease patients of color. Moreover, it was born out of the collective commitment of its founders and supporters to be a catalyst for progress for people of color with rare diseases. As advocates for patients who deal with dual struggles to be included in the promise of scientific advances that improve health outcomes and not to be left behind because of their rare condition or their disease or their race. The leaders of RDDC envision a unique opportunity to contribute to progress for both the rare disease and health disparities movements. While the road to equity is tough, the shocking exposure of racism and inequities in 2020, from policing to the impact of COVID pandemic on people of color, has contributed to the tone and momentum of a new day. Society is demanding real change to address racial inequities. RDDC is encouraged by the discussions of individuals and institutions, including the Biden administration and Congress, on these issues. We continue to develop policy priorities across multiple aspects of rare disease health, including research and clinical trials, delay in diagnosis and treatment, patient and provider education and engagement. and as well as policy development to tackle issues of disparities for underserved communities. It's important that Every Life Foundation and RDDC continue to keep these conversations at the forefront. I look forward to continuing this work and to the synergies created by RDDC and Every Life Foundation to help society seize the momentum for change on racial inequities and drive progress on the continuing struggles regarding health equity and rare diseases. Again, thank you and congratulations on a great week.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I really, really appreciated that. I think, the key points that you raised and how important this conversation was, I'm really looking forward to, like someone said in the chat, when we can meet again in person and discuss diversity in rare disease. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you to the members of the LGBT Equality Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Asian and Pacific American Caucus, and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus for joining us today. Thank you to all our panelists, and again, thank you to you, the attendees, for discussing diversity and rare disease. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.